The dust storm had been raging for 3 days when Maya Chin finally found shelter in the crashed transport ship. Her oxygen reserves were dangerously low, and the radiation counter on her wrist clicked steadily, warning her that this planet was slowly killing her with every breath. She was 16 years old, the only survivor of a colony ship that had malfunctioned during atmospheric entry, and she had been alone on this hostile world for 2 weeks. Maya pressed her back against the twisted metal bulkhead and tried to steady her breathing. The ship's hull groaned ominously in the howling wind outside. Through a jagged hole in the wall, she could see the endless orange wasteland that stretched to the horizon. This world had no name in the human databases, only a designation, X-47b. It was supposed to have been uninhabitable, but somehow she was still alive. Her stomach cramped with hunger. The emergency rations from her escape pod had run out 4 days ago, and she had been surviving on a bitter root she had found growing near underground water sources. The plant tasted awful, but it hadn't killed her yet, which was more than she could say for most things on this planet. Maya pulled up her sleeve and checked the medical scanner embedded in her forearm. The device had been standard issue for all colonists, designed to monitor their health during the long journey to their new home. The readings made her heart sink. Radiation sickness was setting in, and without proper medical treatment, she had maybe a week before the cellular damage became irreversible. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about her parents. They had been in the main colony ship when it broke apart during atmospheric entry. Maya had been in one of the smaller transport pods, conducting a routine inspection of the life support systems when everything went wrong. The memory of watching the main ship burn up in the atmosphere still haunted her dreams. A low rumble echoed through the crashed ship, different from the constant howl of the wind. Maya's eyes snapped open, and she reached for the plasma cutter she had salvaged from the wreckage. The tool wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all she had. The rumbling grew louder, and she felt vibrations through the metal floor. Something large was approaching. Maya crept toward the hole in the hull and peered outside. The dust storm was beginning to clear, and visibility was improving. At first, she saw nothing but the familiar orange landscape dotted with jagged rock formations. Then, movement caught her eye. A massive shape was moving through the dust clouds, easily 4 times the size of the crashed transport ship. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the creature emerged from the storm. It was unlike anything in the colonial xenobiology databases she had studied during the journey. The creature was reptilian, with scales that shifted color from deep purple to metallic silver as it moved. Its body was serpentine but walked on 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws that looked capable of tearing through starship armor. Most striking of all were the membranous wings folded against its back, and the intelligent gleam in its large, amber eyes. A dragon. The word popped into Maya's mind unbidden, drawing from ancient human mythology she had read about in her spare time. Dragons weren't supposed to exist, especially not on a barren world like this one, but there was no other word for the magnificent creature standing less than 100 meters away. The dragon's head swiveled in her direction, and Maya ducked back inside the wreckage, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had read enough xenobiology reports to know that first contact with an unknown species could go very wrong, very quickly. The creature was clearly an apex predator, and she was small, weak, and alone. Minutes passed in tense silence. Maya strained her ears, listening for any sound that might indicate the dragon was approaching. Instead, she heard something unexpected, a low, melodious sound that almost resembled singing. The tone was hauntingly beautiful, rising and falling in complex harmonies that seemed to resonate in her bones. Curiosity overcame caution, and Maya crept back to the hole in the hull. The dragon was still there, but now its posture was different. It sat on its haunches like an enormous cat, its head tilted back toward the stormy sky. The song was coming from the creature itself, a deep thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the air. As Maya watched, other shapes began to emerge from the landscape. They were smaller than the dragon, but clearly of the same species, with scales that range from deep blue to bright green. The newcomers approached the first dragon and joined their voices to its song, creating a chorus that was both alien and somehow familiar. Maya found herself leaning forward, captivated by the display. In all her studies of xenobiology, she had never read about anything like this. The creatures were clearly intelligent, possibly more so than humans had ever encountered. Their song had structure and complexity that suggested advanced communication, maybe even culture. One of the smaller dragons suddenly stopped singing and looked directly at Maya's hiding spot. She froze, certain that she had been discovered. The dragon said something to the others in a series of clicks and whistles, and they all turned toward the crashed ship. Maya scrambled backward, grabbing her few possessions and looking for another way out of the wreckage. There was a maintenance hatch near the rear of the ship, but it was partially blocked by debris. She started pulling away chunks of twisted metal, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The melodious singing stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of approaching footsteps. Maya could hear the dragon's claws clicking against the rocky ground as they moved closer to the ship. She yanked away the last piece of debris blocking the hatch and squeezed through the narrow opening. The back of the ship faced a rocky outcropping that offered some cover. Maya sprinted toward it, clutching her plasma cutter and the small pack containing her remaining supplies. Behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of metal being torn apart as the dragons investigated the crashed ship. She reached the rocks and pressed herself against the largest boulder, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her breathing was ragged, and she could feel her heart pounding so hard that she was sure the dragons would hear it. Through a gap in the rocks, she watched as the largest dragon stuck its head through the hole in the ship's hull. The creature's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air inside the wreckage. It was clearly tracking her scent, and Maya realized that hiding would only delay the inevitable. These creatures were intelligent hunters on their home world, and she was an inexperienced human teenager with no real survival skills. The dragon withdrew its head from the ship and looked around the landscape. Its amber eyes swept across the rocky outcropping where Maya was hiding, and she held her breath. For a moment, their eyes met across the barren landscape, and Maya felt a shock of recognition pass between them. The dragon did not attack. Instead, it sat back on its haunches and tilted its head, regarding her with what almost looked like curiosity. The other dragons gathered around their leader, but they made no aggressive moves toward Maya's hiding spot. Maya slowly stood up, keeping her hands visible and her plasma cutter lowered. Every instinct told her to run, but there was nowhere to go on this barren world. If these creatures wanted to kill her, they could do it easily whether she ran or not. Instead, she stepped out from behind the boulder and faced them directly. The largest dragon made a soft chirping sound and took a step closer. Maya flinched but held her ground. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent than she had realized. Its scales were not just purple and silver, but contained hints of gold and deep blue that shifted with each movement. The intelligence in its eyes was unmistakable, and Maya found herself wondering what thoughts were passing through its alien mind. One of the smaller dragons approached from the side, moving with fluid grace despite its size. As it drew closer, Maya noticed that this one had lighter-colored scales and was more slender than the others. When it spoke, the voice was distinctly different, higher in pitch, and more musical. Maya didn't understand the words, but the tone was gentle, almost questioning. She had the distinct impression that the dragon was trying to communicate with her, not threaten her. Slowly, she raised her hand in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The dragon responded by extending one of its massive claws toward her, stopping just short of touching her outstretched hand. Maya could see her own reflection in the creature's amber eyes, and she realized that this moment would change everything. She was no longer alone on this hostile world, but she had no idea whether that was a good thing or a very dangerous development. As the wind howled around them, Maya, Chun, and the dragon regarded each other across the vast gulf of species and understanding, two intelligent beings trying to bridge a gap that had never been crossed before. The barren world suddenly felt a little less empty, and Maya dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she might actually survive this nightmare after all. The dragon with the lighter scales stepped back and made a series of complex gestures with its claws, accompanied by melodic sounds that seemed almost like questions. Maya watched carefully, trying to understand what the creature was attempting to communicate. The other dragons formed a loose circle around them, but their posture remained non-threatening. Maya pointed to herself and said clearly, "Maya." She repeated the gesture several times, hoping that the concept of names might be universal among intelligent species. The dragon tilted its massive head and made a sound that was almost like an echo of her name, but with harmonic overtones that her human vocal cords could never produce. The dragon then touched its chest with one claw and made a complex sound that lasted several seconds. Maya tried to repeat it, but failed miserably, managing only a crude approximation that made the other dragons make what sounded suspiciously like laughter. The lighter-scaled dragon tried again, this time making a simpler sound that Maya could almost manage. "Zephyr," Maya said finally, deciding to give a dragon a name she could actually pronounce. The creature seemed pleased with this development and repeated Maya again, this time with more confidence. The largest dragon, which Maya had begun thinking of as the leader, approached and examined her with keen intelligence. Its massive head moved closer, and Maya could feel warm breath washing over her as the creature sniffed delicately. She remained perfectly still, aware that one wrong move could end this tentative communication before it really began. Suddenly, the dragon leader made an urgent sound and backed away quickly. The other dragons immediately became alert, their heads swiveling to scan the horizon. Maya followed their gaze and felt her blood run cold. In the distance, a cloud of dust was approaching rapidly across the barren landscape. Zephyr made a series of rapid clicks and chirps, clearly communicating with the others. Maya didn't need to understand the language to recognize urgency when she heard it. Whatever was approaching was dangerous enough to worry creatures that could probably handle most threats on this world. The dust cloud resolved into individual shapes as it drew closer. Maya counted at least a dozen creatures that looked like a cross between giant spiders and scorpions, each one the size of a small ground vehicle. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed black in the orange light of the setting suns, and their multiple eyes reflected the light like mirrors. Worst of all, they were moving with the coordinated efficiency of a pack hunter. The dragon leader let out a low growl and spread its wings partially, making itself appear even larger than before. The other dragons took defensive positions, but Maya could see that they were outnumbered. These spider-scorpion creatures clearly saw the small group as prey, and they were closing in fast. Maya's mind raced. She was the weakest member of this impromptu group, with no natural weapons or defenses. The plasma cutter in her hands would be useless against creatures that size, and she would only slow down the dragons if they tried to flee. But as she looked at Zephyr and the others, she realized she couldn't just stand by and watch them fight alone. The lead creature of the attacking pack paused about 50 meters away and reared up on its hind legs, revealing a mouth full of serrated fangs. It let out a chittering sound that was answered by the rest of its pack, and Maya felt her skin crawl at the inhuman noise. "Arachnoid predators," she whispered, remembering a classification from her xenobiology studies. These creatures typically hunted in coordinated groups and were known for their speed and venomous stingers. The colonist databases had warned about similar creatures on other worlds, describing them as one of the most dangerous threats to human settlement. Zephyr moved closer to Maya, positioning itself between her and the approaching threat. The gesture was clearly protective, and Maya felt a surge of gratitude mixed with guilt. These magnificent creatures had no obligation to defend her, but they were preparing to risk their lives for a stranger from another world. The attack came suddenly. The spider scorpions moved with terrifying speed, their multiple legs carrying them across the rocky ground in a blur of motion. The dragon leader met the first wave with a blast of superheated gas from its mouth that turned the air itself into a weapon. Two of the attackers were caught in the blast and fell writhing to the ground, their exoskeletons cracked and steaming. But the rest of the pack split up, trying to flank the dragons from multiple directions. Zephyr breathed a stream of what looked like liquid lightning, the energy crackling through the air and striking one of the creatures in the center of its mass. The spider scorpion convulsed and collapsed, but three more were already closing in from the other side. Maya realized that the dragon's greatest advantage was their ability to fly, but they were staying on the ground to protect her. If they took to the air, they could use their superior mobility and ranged attacks to pick off the pack hunters one by one. Instead, they were trapped in close combat where the spider scorpion's numbers and speed gave them the advantage. One of the smaller dragons cried out in pain as a stinger found its mark, injecting venom into its flank. The creature stumbled but kept fighting, its claws raking across its attacker's carapace in a shower of sparks and ichor. Maya could see that the venom was already taking effect, slowing the dragon's movements and dulling its responses. "Go!" Maya shouted, waving her arms at the dragons. "Fly! Get out of here!" She knew they couldn't understand her words, but she hoped her gestures would convey the message. The dragons were going to die trying to protect her, and she couldn't let that happen. Zephyr turned toward her for a moment, and Maya saw something in those amber eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't fear or confusion, but determination. The dragon had made a choice, and it wasn't going to abandon her no matter what the cost. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since watching her parents' ship burn up in the atmosphere. These creatures barely knew her, had no reason to care whether she lived or died, but they were willing to sacrifice themselves for her anyway. It was exactly the kind of irrational, emotional decision that made humans unique in the galaxy. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't the only one capable of making illogical choices based on emotion and empathy. These dragons were doing exactly what any human would do in the same situation, protecting someone weaker than themselves simply because it was the right thing to do. Maya raised her plasma cutter and activated its highest setting. The tool wasn't designed as a weapon, but it could cut through starship hull plating when properly focused. She sprinted toward the nearest spider scorpion, which was trying to get around Zephyr's defenses to attack from behind. The creature noticed her approach and turned to face this new threat. Its multiple eyes focused on her, and Maya could see her reflection in their multifaceted surfaces. The thing was easily 3 times her size, with claws that could tear her in half, but she didn't slow down. At the last second, Maya dropped to her knees and slid under the creature's body, bringing the plasma cutter up toward its softer underside. The tool's energy beam sliced through chitin and flesh like it was paper, and the spider scorpion collapsed on top of her with a dying shriek. Maya rolled out from under the creature's weight, covered in alien blood and breathing hard. Around her, the battle was turning. The dragons had rallied after seeing her attack, and their coordinated fire was breaking up the pack's formation. Several more of the spider scorpions lay dead or dying, and the survivors were beginning to retreat. Zephyr appeared beside Maya and gently lifted her to her feet with one massive claw. The dragon's amber eyes were bright with what Maya could only interpret as approval and respect. She had proven herself in battle, shown that humans could be more than just helpless prey. The dragon leader let out a triumphant roar as the last of the spider scorpions fled into the distance. The pack had learned that this group was more dangerous than it had appeared, and they wouldn't be back anytime soon. But the victory had come at cost. 2 of the smaller dragons were injured, one severely, and Maya could see that they needed medical attention. She approached the most badly injured dragon, the one that had been stung during the fight. The creature was lying on its side, breathing heavily as the venom spread through its system. Maya knelt beside it and pulled out her medical scanner, hoping that the device might be able to provide some useful information. The scanner beeped and displayed a complex readout of the dragon's biological functions. Maya's eyes widened as she read the data. The creature's internal structure was remarkably similar to Earth reptiles, but with significant differences that suggested a completely independent evolutionary path. More importantly, the medical scanner had identified the venom and was already calculating potential treatments. Maya looked up at Zephyr and the other dragons, who were watching her intently. She held up the medical scanner and pointed to the injured dragon, then made a series of gestures that she hoped would convey her intention to help. Zephyr chirped something to the others, and they stepped back to give Maya room to work. The medical scanner contained a small supply of universal antibiotics and antitoxins designed to work on a wide range of alien biochemistries. Maya had never used them before, but the device's instructions were clear. She loaded a dose of antitoxin into the scanner's injection system and looked at the injured dragon. The creature looked back at her with pain-clouded eyes, but there was no fear there, only trust. Maya took a deep breath and activated the injection system. The needle was designed to penetrate tough alien hide, and it slid smoothly into the dragon's scales. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the dragon's breathing began to steady, and the glazed look faded from its eyes. The antitoxin was working, neutralizing the spider-scorpion's venom and giving the creature's natural healing abilities a chance to take effect. Zephyr made a soft sound that Maya interpreted as gratitude, and the other dragons gathered around the recovering patient. Maya found herself accepted into the circle, no longer an outsider, but part of the group. She had proven herself in battle and demonstrated her ability to help rather than just be helped. As the sun set over the barren landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya realized that she was no longer alone. She had found allies in the most unexpected place, creatures that embodied the same values of courage, loyalty, and compassion that humans held dear. Whatever challenges this hostile world had left to throw at them, they would face them together. The dragon leader approached Maya and made a complex gesture with its wings, pointing toward the horizon where a range of mountains was barely visible in the fading light. Zephyr translated with a series of clicks and chirps, and Maya got the distinct impression that they were being invited somewhere safe, somewhere that could be home. Maya nodded and shouldered her pack, ready to follow her new companions into the unknown. For the first time since the colony ship had crashed, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. The journey to the mountains took 2 days, and Maya learned more about her new companions with each passing hour. The dragons moved across the barren landscape with surprising grace, their powerful legs carrying them over terrain that would have been impossible for a human to navigate alone. They seemed to know exactly where they were going, following paths that were invisible to Maya's eyes, but clearly well-established routes through the wasteland. Zephyr stayed close to Maya throughout the journey, often slowing down to match her much shorter pace. The dragon had developed a basic system of communication with her, using different tones and gestures to convey simple concepts. Maya found herself picking up the rudiments of their language faster than she had expected, and she began to suspect that the dragons were deliberately simplifying their speech to help her understand. The dragon leader, whom Maya had begun calling Storm because of the deep rumbling sounds it made, occasionally took to the air to scout ahead. From these aerial surveys, Storm would return with detailed reports that the others seemed to understand perfectly. Maya wished she could follow the complex discussions that followed these scouting flights, but the rapid-fire exchanges were still beyond her limited vocabulary. On the evening of the second day, they crested a ridge, and Maya got her first view of the dragon's destination. Hidden in a valley between towering peaks was something that took her breath away, a vast complex of carved stone structures that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural rock formations. Bridges arched gracefully between spires, and Maya could see gardens of alien plants growing in carefully tended terraces. A city, she whispered in amazement. The dragons had built an entire civilization in this hidden valley, completely invisible from the outside. As they descended toward the settlement, Maya began to see more dragons moving through the streets and tending to various tasks. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a thriving community. Zephyr made an excited sound and pointed toward one of the larger buildings near the center of the city. The structure was different from the others, with smooth curves instead of angular lines, and what appeared to be transparent sections that let light pass through. As they approached, Maya realized that the building was some kind of medical facility or research center. Other dragons began to emerge from their homes and workplaces as word of the traveler's arrival spread. Maya found herself the center of attention, but the looks she received were curious rather than hostile. These dragons had clearly never seen a human before, but they didn't seem afraid of her presence. Storm led the group directly to the medical facility, where an elderly dragon with scales that had faded to pale silver came out to greet them. This dragon moved with the careful dignity of great age, and the respect shown by the others made it clear that this was someone of considerable importance. The elderly dragon examined the injured member of their group with skilled movements, checking the site where Maya had administered the antitoxin and making soft sounds of approval. When Storm explained what had happened, gesturing toward Maya several times during the account, the healer's large eyes fixed on her with keen interest. Zephyr guided Maya forward, and the healer approached her slowly. Maya stood still as the ancient dragon sniffed delicately around her, much as Storm had done during their first meeting. The healer's examination was more thorough, however, and Maya got the impression that this dragon was learning far more about her than she would have thought possible from such simple observation. Finally, the healer straightened up and made a long, complex sound that seemed to be directed at the gathered crowd. Whatever the dragon had said caused a stir of excitement among the onlookers. Maya caught several repetitions of sounds that might have been her name, along with other words she didn't recognize. What did they say? Maya asked Zephyr, knowing that the dragon probably couldn't understand her question, but hoping for some kind of clue. Zephyr responded with a series of gestures and sounds that Maya was beginning to associate with positive concepts. The dragon seemed excited and pleased about something, though Maya couldn't figure out what had caused this reaction. The healer made another announcement, and several of the younger dragons stepped forward. Maya found herself gently, but firmly guided toward the medical facility, with Zephyr translating what she hoped were reassurances about her safety. Inside the building, Maya's eyes widened at the sophisticated equipment she saw. The dragons had clearly advanced far beyond what humans had achieved in medical technology. Crystalline devices hummed with energy, and holographic displays showed complex biological data that Maya could only partially interpret. The healer directed her to a platform in the center of the main chamber, and Maya hesitantly climbed onto it. Immediately, beams of soft light began playing over her body, and she could see her vital signs and biological structure appearing on the holographic displays around the room. The gathered dragons watched the readings with intense interest, occasionally making comments to each other in their musical language. Maya noticed that they seemed particularly excited about certain aspects of the scan, though she couldn't tell what had captured their attention. After several minutes, the scanning beams shut off, and the healer approached her again. This time, the ancient dragon's movements were different, more reverential. It placed one massive claw gently on Maya's shoulder and spoke directly to her in slow, careful tones that she actually managed to understand partly. The dragon was saying something about healing, about her being able to help others the way she had helped the injured member of their group. Maya's medical scanner had been primitive compared to their technology, but somehow her intervention had been significant in a way she didn't fully grasp. Zephyr moved closer and began what was clearly an attempt at explanation. Using a combination of gestures, simple sounds, and drawings scratched into the stone floor, the dragon began to tell Maya about their people's greatest challenge. The story that emerged was heartbreaking. A plague had struck the dragon community several years ago, targeting their youngest members. The adult dragons were immune, but their children were dying faster than the healers could treat them. Despite all their advanced medical knowledge, they had been unable to find a cure. Maya listened with growing understanding as Zephyr explained that the spider-scorpion venom was somehow related to the plague affecting their young. The healers had tried everything they could think of, but none of their treatments had been effective against the specific toxins involved. Then, Maya had appeared with her primitive medical scanner and its supply of universal antitoxins. The treatment she had administered to the injured dragon hadn't just neutralized the venom. It had demonstrated that human medical technology, while crude by dragon standards, approached the problem from a completely different angle. The healer was asking for her help. They wanted to study her medical scanner and work with her to develop new treatments that could save their children. Maya felt a surge of excitement mixed with terror. She was just a 16-year-old colonist with basic medical training, not a research scientist or doctor. But as she looked around at the hopeful faces of the dragons who had risked their lives to protect her, Maya knew she couldn't refuse. These beings had shown her nothing but kindness and courage. If there was any way she could help save their children, she had to try. Maya nodded slowly and pointed to her medical scanner, then gestured toward the sophisticated equipment around them. She tried to convey that she was willing to share everything she knew, even though she suspected her knowledge would seem laughably primitive to these advanced beings. The healer's response surprised her. Instead of dismissing her offer, the ancient dragon seemed deeply moved. It said something to the assembled crowd that caused several of the younger dragons to step forward eagerly, clearly volunteering to work with Maya on this project. Zephyr translated as best it could, explaining that the healer valued Maya's offer not because of her advanced knowledge, but because she brought a completely different perspective. Sometimes, the dragon explained, the solution to a complex problem came not from greater sophistication, but from looking at the challenge with fresh eyes. Over the next few hours, Maya found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Dragon researchers brought her to see their sick children, and Maya's heart broke at the sight of the young ones lying listlessly in their healing chambers. The little dragons were beautiful, with scales that shimmered like jewels, but they were clearly suffering from something that was draining their life force. Maya activated her medical scanner and began examining the young patients. The device's readings showed biological markers that were similar to what she had seen with the spider-scorpion venom, but different in crucial ways. It was as if the plague was a mutated version of the same toxin, one that had adapted specifically to attack dragon physiology. Working with the dragon healers, Maya began to piece together a theory about what was happening. The spider-scorpions had always been a threat to dragon communities, but recently their venom had begun to change. Whether through natural evolution or some other factor, the toxin had become airborne in certain conditions, creating a plague that could spread without direct contact. The human antitoxins in Maya's scanner worked because they were designed to target the basic molecular structure of the venom, regardless of how it had been modified. The dragon healers had been trying to counter the specific mutations, but they had overlooked the underlying chemistry that remained constant. Maya spent hours working with the research team, sharing data from her scanner and learning to operate their more sophisticated equipment. The dragons were patient teachers, and they seemed genuinely impressed by her ability to think about problems in ways they hadn't considered. As the night wore on, Maya began to feel something she hadn't experienced since before the colony ship crashed, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was contributing something meaningful to the lives of others. These remarkable beings had saved her from despair and death, and now she had a chance to save their children in return. The breakthrough came just before dawn. Working together, Maya and the lead researcher had developed a modified version of a human antitoxin that could be adapted to dragon physiology. The treatment would need to be administered carefully, and there were still risks, but for the first time in years, there was real hope for the affected children. Maya watched with tears in her eyes as the first young dragon received the experimental treatment. Within minutes, the listless creature began to show signs of improvement, its scales brightening and its eyes becoming more alert. The assembled healers made sounds of joy and amazement as their youngest patient sat up for the first time in weeks. Zephyr appeared beside Maya and gently touched her shoulder with one claw. The dragon's amber eyes were bright with gratitude and something that Maya could only describe as deep friendship. In just a few days, she had gone from being a lost and dying stranger to becoming part of this community in the most meaningful way possible. As the celebration continued around them, Maya realized that she had found something on this barren world that she had never expected, a home. These dragons had given her more than just protection and shelter. They had given her a purpose and a family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as part of this remarkable community that had embraced her as one of their own. 3 months had passed since Maya's arrival in the hidden dragon city, and she had adapted to her new life with remarkable speed. The young dragon patients were not only recovering, but thriving under the new treatment protocol she had helped develop. Maya had become something of a celebrity among the dragon community, though she still felt overwhelmed by the attention at times. Zephyr had appointed herself as Maya's permanent companion and translator, and their friendship had deepened into something that transcended species boundaries. The dragon had learned to speak several dozen human words, while Maya had become fairly fluent in basic dragon communication. Their conversations were a mixture of both languages, supplemented by gestures and shared understanding. Maya had been given her own dwelling in the city, a beautifully carved chamber high up in one of the spires that offered a spectacular view of the surrounding mountains. The dragons had modified the space to accommodate her human needs, installing air purification systems and adjusting the temperature controls to maintain a comfortable environment. But despite her growing comfort in dragon society, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her story was far from over. Her medical scanner's deep space communication array had detected faint signals from human ships somewhere in the outer system. Rescue was possible, but it would require getting a message to the approaching vessels. The problem was that the Dragon City was shielded by the natural mineral composition of the mountains, which blocked most electromagnetic signals. To reach the human ships, Maya would need to get to higher ground with a clear view of space, and that meant leaving the safety of the valley. Maya had been wrestling with this dilemma for weeks when an urgent alarm echoed through the city. She rushed to the central plaza where Storm was addressing a large gathering of dragons. Even without understanding every word, Maya could tell that something serious was happening. Zephyr found her in the crowd and quickly explained the situation. Scout patrols had discovered massive spider-scorpion hives moving across the wasteland toward their valley. These weren't the small hunting packs they had encountered before, but entire colonies on the march, possibly thousands of individuals led by creatures larger and more dangerous than anything they had previously seen. The Dragon Council convened immediately to discuss their options. Maya was invited to attend, an honor that still amazed her even after months of acceptance. The debate was intense, with different factions advocating for various strategies, ranging from immediate evacuation to a coordinated defense of the city. Maya listened carefully as the dragons argued, her understanding of their language having improved enough to follow most of the discussion. The spider scorpions were apparently migrating due to changes in the planet's ecosystem, driven from their traditional territories by some unknown force. The Dragon City lay directly in their path, and there was no way to avoid a confrontation. Storm presented reconnaissance reports that painted a grim picture. The approaching hives contained not just the spider scorpions they had fought before, but new variants that were larger, more heavily armored, and capable of coordinated tactical thinking. Worst of all, the creatures seemed to have developed immunity to the dragon's breath weapons, possibly through exposure to the same environmental changes that had driven their migration. The eldest council member, An ancient dragon whose scales had turned completely white with age, finally spoke in a voice that commanded absolute attention. The dragon proposed a strategy that shocked Maya with its boldness and desperation. They would launch a preemptive strike against the approaching hives while they were still separated by several days of travel. The plan was risky beyond measure. The dragons would have to leave their city defenseless, while their entire adult population flew out to engage an enemy that outnumbered them by at least 10 to 1. But if they could disrupt the hive migration and force the spider scorpions to scatter, they might buy enough time to evacuate their young and find a new sanctuary. Maya found herself standing before she had consciously decided to speak. The entire council turned to look at her, and she felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. In halting dragon speech, supplemented by gestures and the occasional human word, she began to present an alternative. What if they didn't have to choose between defense and offense? Maya's medical scanner had detected the human ships, and those vessels would be equipped with military-grade weapons and shield systems. If she could contact them and explain the situation, they might be willing to provide assistance to the dragon community that had saved a human life. The council erupted in discussion at this suggestion. Some dragons were skeptical that any help would arrive in time, while others questioned whether humans could be trusted to honor such an agreement. But Storm raised a massive claw for silence and asked Maya to explain her plan in detail. Maya outlined what she knew about human military protocols and the resources that would be available to a rescue mission. The approaching ships would almost certainly include at least one heavy cruiser with orbital bombardment capabilities, plus fighter squadrons equipped for ground support operations. More importantly, humans had extensive experience fighting arthropod species on other worlds and would know exactly how to exploit the spider scorpion's weaknesses. The ancient white dragon asked the question that Maya had been dreading. What guarantee could she offer that the humans would help rather than simply evacuating her and leaving the dragons to their fate? Maya had to admit that she couldn't make any such guarantee, but she believed that most humans would respond to a request for assistance from beings who had saved one of their own. Zephyr suddenly spoke up in support of Maya's plan, pointing out that the human had already proven her loyalty to their community by helping to save their children. If Maya believed that her people would help, then they should trust her judgment. Several other dragons who had worked closely with Maya added their voices to this assessment. After hours of debate, the council reached a decision. They would implement a combination strategy. The majority of their fighters would prepare for the preemptive strike, while a small group would escort Maya to a communication site where she could attempt to contact the human ships. If her efforts succeeded, the dragon attack could be coordinated with human support. If not, they would proceed with their original desperate plan. Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror as she prepared for the mission. Everything would depend on her ability to convince the human rescue mission to involve themselves in an alien conflict. She had no authority to negotiate on behalf of Earth or the colonial administration, but she hoped that basic human decency would be enough. The journey to the communication site took Maya and her escort through some of the most dangerous terrain on the planet. They traveled by night to avoid detection by spider scorpion scouts, following ancient paths that wound through hidden canyons and across windswept plateaus. Maya rode on Zephyr's back for most of the journey, marveling at her friend's strength and endurance. The communication site was located on a mountain peak that rose far above the mineral deposits that blocked electromagnetic signals. It had been used by the dragons for their own long-distance communication network, but Maya's equipment should be able to adapt their systems for human frequencies. As they climbed toward the summit, Maya caught her first clear view of the approaching spider-scorpion migration. Even from a distance of several kilometers, the sight was terrifying. The creatures moved across the landscape like a living carpet, their chitinous bodies reflecting the light of the setting suns in an endless glitter of black and silver. There were far more of them than even the worst estimates had suggested. At the communication site, Maya worked feverishly to modify her medical scanner's transmitter using components salvaged from the Dragon communication array. The work was delicate and dangerous. One mistake could destroy her scanner's electronics and eliminate any chance of contacting the human ships. Zephyr and the other dragons maintained a vigilant watch while Maya worked. The spider scorpions had scouts ranging far ahead of their main force, and there was always a chance that the communications activity would draw unwanted attention to their position. Finally, after hours of careful modification, Maya activated the enhanced transmitter and began broadcasting on all human emergency frequencies. Her message was simple but urgent. A human colonist was alive on the surface and requesting immediate assistance for a non-human population facing extermination by hostile native species. The response came faster than Maya had dared to hope. The voice that crackled through her scanner speakers was crisp and professional, with the distinctive accent of a military communications officer. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UCN Valiant. We read you, survivor. Please identify yourself and provide your current status." Maya's hand shook as she activated the transmission key. "This is Maya Chun, passenger on the colony ship New Horizon. I'm alive and safe, but I need to request military assistance for the beings who saved my life. There's a city of intelligent, non-hostile aliens under attack by aggressive native species, and they don't have the firepower to defend themselves." There was a long pause before the captain responded. "Maya Chun, our records show you as missing and presumed dead. We're extremely glad to hear that you survived, but I need you to understand that we're not authorized to involve ourselves in local conflicts between native species." Maya felt her heart sink, but she pressed on. "Captain, these aren't just animals fighting over territory. The dragons are a sophisticated civilization with advanced technology and medical knowledge. They saved my life and adopted me into their community. I'm asking you to help me save their children." Another pause, then, "Did you say dragons?" "Yes, ma'am. Intelligent reptilian beings with their own language, culture, and technology. They're peaceful unless threatened, and they're facing extinction from a massive arthropod migration. Please, Captain, you have to help them." Maya could hear muffled voices in the background as Captain Chun consulted with her officers. When she came back on the channel, her tone had changed slightly. "Maya, we're going to need a lot more information before we can make any decisions. Can you provide detailed intelligence on both the friendly aliens and the hostile species?" For the next hour, Maya transmitted everything she had learned about both the dragons and the spider scorpions. She described the dragon city, their technology, their social structure, and their relationship with the hostile arthropods. She provided detailed tactical information about spider scorpion capabilities, numbers, and weaknesses based on her own experience and dragon intelligence reports. Captain Chin listened to everything without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details. When Maya finished her report, there was another long pause before the captain spoke again. "Maya, what you're describing sounds like a potential first contact situation with a peaceful, technologically advanced species. If your assessment is accurate, then we have a responsibility under colonial protocols to provide assistance to non-hostile intelligences facing extinction. I'm going to need authorization from Fleet Command, but I want you to know that my initial inclination is to help." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as relief flooded through her. "Thank you, Captain. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet, Maya. We still need to figure out how to coordinate with your dragon friends and develop a tactical plan that doesn't get everyone killed. Are you able to maintain communication and serve as a liaison?" Maya looked at Zephyr, who had been listening intently despite not understanding the human language. Her friend's amber eyes were full of hope and trust, and Maya knew that whatever happened next, she would not let the dragons down. "Yes, Captain. I'll do whatever you need me to do." The next 18 hours were the most intense of Maya's life. Captain Chun had received authorization from Fleet Command to provide assistance, but coordinating a joint operation between humans and dragons proved to be incredibly complex. Maya found herself serving as translator, tactical advisor, and cultural liaison all at once. The human fleet had taken position in high orbit, using their advanced sensors to map the approaching spider-scorpion migration. The intelligence they provided was sobering. The arthropod force was even larger than the dragons had estimated, with at least 50,000 individual creatures organized into multiple specialized castes. Worse, the humans had detected several queen-class organisms the size of buildings, protected by dedicated warrior breeds that were significantly more dangerous than the standard hunters. Working through Maya's communication link, Captain Shun and Storm developed a battle plan that played to both species' strengths. The dragons would launch their preemptive strike as planned, but instead of trying to destroy the entire migration, they would focus on disrupting the enemy formation and drawing the largest threats into the open. Meanwhile, human fighter squadrons would provide air support, and orbital bombardment would target the Queen-class organisms. Maya translated frantically as technical details flew back and forth between the two commanders. The dragon's knowledge of spider-scorpion behavior patterns proved invaluable, while human military doctrine provided tactical frameworks that the dragons had never considered. Despite the language barriers and cultural differences, a workable strategy began to emerge. The attack would begin at dawn, when the spider-scorpions were most vulnerable due to the cold affecting their mobility. Dragon strike teams would hit the migration's flanks, while human fighters engaged the aerial variants that the dragons had warned them about. Once the enemy formation was sufficiently disrupted, orbital strikes would eliminate the queens and their immediate defenders. As the sun rose over the barren landscape, Maya watched from her mountaintop communication post as the battle began. The dragon strike force was magnificent to behold, their scales glittering like jewels as they flew in perfect formation toward their targets. Storm led the assault with the grace and power of a natural warrior, breathing streams of superheated plasma that carved through enemy ranks. The spider-scorpions responded quickly to the attack, their own aerial castes rising to meet the dragons while ground forces began reorganizing into defensive positions. Maya held her breath as she watched the first engagement, knowing that everything depended on the dragon's ability to draw out the largest threats without getting overwhelmed. Suddenly, the sky above the battlefield erupted with human fighter craft dropping out of orbital insertion trajectories. The sleek vessels moved with mechanical precision, their weapons systems locked onto targets designated by Dragon Reconnaissance. Plasma cannons and missile salvos rained down on spider-scorpion formations, creating chaos in their carefully organized ranks. Dragon Leader, this is Lightning Leader, came Captain Chen's voice over Maya's communicator. We have multiple bogies ascending to your position. Recommend you break north and let us handle the flyers. Maya quickly translated the warning, and Storm acknowledged with a burst of Draconic that roughly meant understood and agreed. The dragon formation split apart just as a swarm of flying spider-scorpions reached their altitude, allowing the human fighters to engage without risking friendly fire. The aerial battle was unlike anything Maya had ever seen. Human pilots relied on speed and advanced targeting systems, dancing through the sky while their weapons found targets with mechanical precision. The dragons fought with instinctive grace and devastating breath weapons that could destroy multiple enemies with each attack. Working together, they tore through the spider-scorpion air forces like a hurricane through a forest. On the ground, the real prize targets were beginning to emerge. The Queen-class organisms had been hidden deep within the migration, protected by layers of warriors and specialized defenders. But the coordinated air assault was forcing them to reveal themselves as they tried to maintain control over their scattered forces. All units, this is Valiant Actual. Captain Chen's voice crackled over the communication link. We have positive identification on primary targets. Commencing orbital bombardment in 30 seconds. All friendly units clear the target zones. Maya translated the warning as fast as she could, watching the dragons pull back from areas that were about to be hit by weapons that could crack continents. The spider-scorpion queens seemed to sense the danger as well, their massive forms beginning to move with surprising speed despite their size. The orbital bombardment was a sight that Maya knew she would never forget. Beams of concentrated energy descended from space like pillars of fire, striking their targets with the force of falling stars. The largest queen-class organism simply vanished in a flash of vaporized chitin and superheated rock. Two others were caught as they tried to flee, their death screams audible even from Maya's distant observation post. But the battle was far from over. Enraged by the loss of their queens, the surviving spider-scorpions launched a desperate counterattack against any target they could reach. Several dragon fighters were overwhelmed by sheer numbers, and Maya watched in horror as one of them fell toward the ground, trailing smoke and flame. "Zephyr!" Maya shouted, recognizing her friend's distinctive flight pattern. Without thinking, she activated her personal communicator. "Captain Chun, one of the dragons is going down in Sector 7. Can you provide search and rescue?" "Negative, Maya. That area is still hot with enemy activity. We can't risk a rescue mission until the hostiles are cleared." Maya felt despair wash over her as she watched Zephyr's damaged form disappear behind a rocky ridge. Her friend was alone, possibly injured, in the middle of a battlefield swarming with vengeful spider-scorpions. The human forces were doing everything they could, but they were focused on the larger strategic picture. Then, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She grabbed her plasma cutter and the emergency medical kit from her pack, then headed for the small atmospheric shuttle that the dragons had used to bring her to the communication post. "Maya, what are you doing?" came Captain Chin's voice as sensors detected the shuttle's activation. "I'm going after my friend," Maya replied, her hands flying over the dragon control interfaces that she had learned to operate during her months in the city. "Zephyr saved my life, and I'm not leaving her behind." "Maya, that's suicide. You're not qualified to operate that craft in a combat zone." "Maybe not," Maya admitted as the shuttle lifted off from the mountain peak. "But I'm human, and we don't abandon our friends." The flight to Zephyr's crash site was the most terrifying experience of Maya's life. Spider-scorpion flyers dove at her shuttle repeatedly, their claws scraping across the hull as she dodged and weaved through their attacks. The dragon craft was faster and more maneuverable than it appeared, but Maya's inexperience showed in every jerky movement and panic course correction. Human fighters appeared around her shuttle, their pilots apparently having received orders to escort the crazy human who was flying into the teeth of enemy resistance. "Stay with us, Maya," came a pilot's voice over her communicator. "We'll clear you a path to your friend." Maya followed the fighters through a gauntlet of enemy fire, watching in amazement as the human pilots systematically eliminated every threat in their path. These weren't the careful, measured attacks she had seen during the orbital bombardment, but the desperate fury of soldiers protecting one of their own. She found Zephyr pinned beneath the wreckage of her damaged wings, surrounded by a circle of spider-scorpion warriors that were closing in for the kill. Maya landed her shuttle as close as possible and charged out with her plasma cutter blazing, cutting down the nearest attackers before they could react to this new threat. Zephyr looked up at Maya with surprise and gratitude, but also pain. The dragon's left wing was clearly broken, and there were deep gashes across her flanks where spider-scorpion claws had found their mark. Maya quickly administered pain medication from her medical kit while checking for more serious injuries. "Can you move?" Maya asked in dragon speech, knowing that they had only minutes before more enemies arrived. Zephyr struggled to her feet, favoring her injured wing, but still mobile. Together, they made their way back to the shuttle, while human fighters held off increasingly desperate spider-scorpion attacks. Maya had never been so glad to see the interior of the dragon craft as when she finally got the hatch sealed behind them. The return flight to the mountain communication post was easier, with human escorts clearing the way and most of the spider-scorpion forces either dead or in full retreat. By the time Maya landed, the battle was essentially over. The migration had been shattered, its queens dead, and its surviving members scattered across hundreds of square kilometers of wasteland. Captain Chun was waiting for Maya when she emerged from the shuttle, having landed her own craft on the mountain peak. The human officer was a tall, professional-looking woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Maya strongly of her own mother. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," Captain Chun said, looking Maya up and down with evident amazement. "Flying an unfamiliar aircraft into a combat zone to rescue an alien. What were you thinking?" Maya helped Zephyr out of the shuttle, supporting her injured friend as they walked toward the waiting humans. "I was thinking that courage and loyalty aren't uniquely human traits, Captain. These dragons showed me more kindness and acceptance than I had any right to expect. The least I could do was return the favor." Captain Chin's expression softened as she watched the obvious affection between Maya and Zephyr. "I've been in contact with the dragon leadership during the battle. They're inviting our medical teams to help treat their wounded, and they want to discuss ongoing cooperation agreements. It seems like first contact is going to be a lot more successful than anyone expected." Over the following days, Maya served as the primary liaison between human and dragon representatives as they worked out the details of a historic agreement. The dragons would share their advanced medical and engineering knowledge, while humans would provide military protection and help establish trade relationships with the broader galactic community. Maya found herself facing a difficult choice. She could return to human space and rejoin the colonial mission that had originally brought her to this world, or she could stay with the dragon community that had become her true home. The decision wasn't really difficult at all. 6 months later, Maya stood on a balcony of the newly constructed human embassy in the Dragon City, watching as the first joint research teams began their work in the laboratories below. Zephyr appeared beside her, fully recovered from her battle injuries, and now serving as the dragon ambassador to human space. "Do you ever regret staying?" Zephyr asked in the hybrid language they had developed, mixing human and dragon words with perfect understanding. Maya smiled and looked out over the bustling city that had grown to accommodate both species. Human children played in the gardens alongside young dragons, while their parents worked together on projects that would benefit both civilizations. "Never," Maya replied honestly. "I came to this world as a lost and frightened refugee, but I found something here that I never expected, a home where courage, loyalty, and compassion matter more than what species you belong to. This is where I'm meant to be." As the suns set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had learned that being human wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy. It was about being willing to extend friendship across impossible differences, to risk everything for those who mattered, and to find family in the most unexpected places. The barren world that had once seemed like her grave had become the foundation for something magnificent. A true partnership between species that proved the universe was far more welcoming than anyone had dared to hope. And at the center of it all was a 16-year-old human girl who had discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when everything seems lost. Maya Chin was no longer alone, and she never would be again.